Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Judy Kay. I'm a Master Gardener in Calvert County. And today we're going to talk about, putting a buzz in your garden. How you can attract pollinators to your garden. I'm going to cover a lot of plants and other things that you can do in your landscape to attract pollinators. I'm going to focus on our native bees. I will mention honeybees, which are not native to the United States. And I hope to destroy a few myths about honeybees as I go along. The best thing they do is make honey. I am a representative of the University of Maryland through the Extension Office here in Calvert County. And I want you to notice the Home and Garden Information Center. This is the website. There is scans of information in there. If you log on, there are also fact sheets you can obtain. But if you go on weekly, you'll get an update on what's going on in the horticultural world, insects, invasive, good ones, who's out there, what's out there. So do go to use it. I am a Master Gardener in Maryland, as I said, but specifically in Calvert County. We are trained by the University of Maryland, and we do use science-based information, and some of that keeps changing as we go along. We learn new things. A lot of farming methods have changed just in the last 10 years or so. The Baywise Yard Certification Program gives you the opportunity to invite Master Gardeners to your yard to get the Baywise certification. I think there's some Baywise folders back there, I hope. And we can also give you advice about what native plants you might want to use in your garden, which is what we're really here to talk about today. So why is pollination important? Do any of you like any of these things? If we didn't have pollination, all of those would be wiped off of there. So we need to do more things to change the habitat, to change what we do in our own backyards. We cannot do it all in land trusts or parks or preserves. We need to do a lot of things, and I'm going to go through those with your landscape. Pollination is the process by which plants reproduce. 75% of all plants require some pollination, and 80% of our food crop requires pollination. They say that every third bite we eat is the direct result of pollination. If you do indirect results, it's even higher. Alfalfa, for example, needs to be pollinated, and it requires specific pollinators. Alfalfa feeds a lot of herbivores. They might not have food if we didn't have pollination. So we are the indirect recipients of that. They've done a lot of studies, and we find that animal-pollinated crops have more antioxidants, more vitamins, more minerals. They're better, they taste better, and they have more nutrition for you. The plants, going back to the blooms that you saw, over 250,000 of our flowering plants on Earth require pollination. And I'm going to introduce you just to a little tiny fraction of those today. If they aren't pollinated, we'll lose the bees, the birds, butterflies, us. So it's a great concern because all of the bees are declining, as is wildlife in general. We have about 200,000 animal species around the world that pollinate. We start with the giraffes. They pollinate the acacia trees. They stick their noses into the blooms, they go a little bit on their lips, and they go to the next bloom. So they are pollinators. And it goes all the way down to mosquitoes, which pollinate plants that grow in swamps, swampy areas, and a lot of our native orchids are pollinated by mosquitoes. They'll also pollinate very far north in Alaska. There are a few bees that can survive and pollinate up there. That doesn't mean you shouldn't select mosquito next time you see it. Plants and pollinators evolved together. They developed shapes and time of blooming, and they're very connected. Some bees pollinate specific plants. Those plants require those bees only to pollinate them. And if you lose one, you're going to lose the other one. Climate change is starting to affect things in some areas. But by far, and I probably will stress this again throughout the talk, the most damaging thing to our pollinators and to our wildlife is loss of habitat. And that's where you come in. You can help change that. A great book on that is Dr. Talany's book, Bringing Nature Home, What to Do in Your Own Backyard. I highly recommend it. I hope all Master Gardeners have read it. Bees in the United States. There are over 4,000 species of bees. Half of them are no larger than a grain of rice. I attended a lecture last night by Sam Drogi, who works with the U.S. Geological Society at Patuxent, I think it's Wildlife Refuge, I'm not sure the full name. And he has finally done a survey of Maryland bees. No one knew just how many bees there were in Maryland. They have found, so far, 435 species in Maryland. They trap the bee, they catch the bees in traps, or they net them, and then they have to take them into a lab to identify them. He made me feel good because I look at bees and I take pictures of bees and I can't find them in the book. You really need to be an expert to identify them. So, made me feel a little bit better. They found 155 species in Calvert County. The highest they found was in Charles, but that's actually where he works, so he said there's a reason for that because he's done most of the trapping. But they do have individual people who are willing to do that for them here in Calvert and in other places. If you see bees, there are probably at least 100 bees in one location, which is astonishing. I never see that many, and I do look. Bees are like many wild creatures. They are opportunists, such as birds looking for food. Bees will fly around. Oh, there's a nice patch of blooms. Maybe there's some pollen and nectar there, and I will go visit it. So that's what you need to do in your yard, is to get plant things that will attract the bees as they're flying over. They're all under stress, again, primarily by habitat loss, but the overuse of pesticides. Then we have pollution, we have disease, and climate change. Disease probably does not affect our wild native bees as much as it does the honeybees. Most of our native bees are solitary bees. They aren't as likely to sting you. Some of them really don't sting much at all. They are not defending a nest. Unlike honeybees, which have a hive, they're very actively building up the colony. Most bees lay their eggs and they leave. They don't hang around to do anything for them. They put food in with them. They are also more efficient pollinators of many crops than our non-native honeybees are. You know, most of you still think honeybees do everything, but we'll find out if you want. So let's find out what we can do, what you can do to help them. First, and if you've ever gone to a Baywise talk, one of the first things we say is lose the lawn, or at least reduce it. This is my front yard. It isn't all native, but it's primarily native. This is Blue Star in the beginning. This is early in the spring. Peonies are coming out in the background. And I have leaves in the path. I'm going to talk a little bit more about habitat and using leaves as mulch instead of buying mulch. When you start on this, if you start on it in your own yard, you're not going to achieve this in a year. This is at least 10 years old, probably 12 to 15, and I'm still working on it. Sorry about my throat. The next thing you want to do when you're planting your gardens is to plan for blooms from spring through fall. In the first one in the spring, we have Penstemon digitalis, beard tongue, St. John's wort, some little sun drops, and there are a lot of other plants that really don't show up. In the summer, there are bee balm. Bee balm is one of the best plants around to attract bees, hummingbirds, sphinx moths, butterflies, you name it. If they like pollen or nectar, they will be there. There's also mountain mint in there too. Both of those spread. They may not be right for your yard. It depends on what kind of yard you want. I have a sort of a natural messy yard. And we encourage you to be messy, actually. This is not my front yard, but this is a fall planting of bridal wreath goldenrod and white snakeroot. They bloom late in the fall, and there are lots and lots of small weeds out late in the fall that look into these plants. If you go out there, sometimes just buzzing with bees on them. Oh, I have to talk about the winter. I took this a few weeks ago. I did not cut back anything in my front yard. I thought about it one day last fall, and I opened the door, and some juncos flew out from the blue star stems that were left, which are right in there, provided habitat. So I walked back in and said, well, maybe by spring, if not, they'll fall over and take care of themselves. So choosing plants. You really want to choose native plants, as many as possible that are native to the area, because that will support the bees that are native to here. They've all evolved and developed together. So you want to try to stay as locally native as you can. You may not be able to. The other thing, our native plants, you want for the butterflies, because there are very direct connections. Most of you know about monarchs and milkweed. That's the only species of plant that they, or excuse me, the only genus of plants that they eat. The caterpillars eat. No milkweed, no caterpillars, no butterflies. It's that simple. That's true for most insects that eat plants. There are a few who are generalists. We all know about the Japanese beetle. They eat about 400 species of plants. Some of the other insects will eat only 1 or 2 plants. Use layers, different heights of planting. This shows at our demo gardens, the Joe weed, which is taller. We have black-eyed Susans in the background, which are about this tall. They all attract butterflies and bees. You want a variety of bloom sizes. You want shapes and depths of blooms. Some bees have long tongues, some have short tongues, so they need a different depth in order to get to the nectar. The short-tongued bee can't get to something that has the nectar way down here. A long tongue could get to it, but it might really prefer a bloom with a deeper nectar dish. Remember, the nectar is usually at the bottom. You need plants with strong stems in order to support the bees. And you want to mash your plant species together. Pollinators are attracted by masses of color. Also, you're saving them energy. They can, in this, on the bee balm, they can literally hop from one plant to another to get nectar. And they know which plants have nectar. Does anybody have an idea of how they know? When a plant has nectar down in the cup, it gives off a positive charge. When there's no nectar, there's no charge, the bee will ignore it and go on. The plant will eventually recharge the nectar and the bee will find it. I have a feeling that hummingbirds probably are the same way, because they know in studies they've marked hummingbird visited here. It's not going back to that plant for several hours. And they put graduate students out in the field to sit and watch them count how many times. So my guess is they haven't found it, but my guess is they have some ability to sense that as well. We ask that you use the species rather than the cultivars. Sometimes it's very hard to find the species. Everybody wants cultivars. They want bigger blooms, they want fancier blooms, they want to bloom for a longer period of time, they want a different color than the original one. But the nectar in those may be inferior, and it may be difficult to obtain, for the bee to obtain.
From the species that cultivar, what is that? I don't understand.
Okay, the cultivar frequently, Sometimes there's a variety that you find that occurs naturally on the field, and they will take it and propagate it, so you've got a white bloom instead of a red bloom. But most of the changes now are done in laboratories by scientists. And they're still looking to make, what is it, black petunias. Somehow that's like the holy grail in the plant world. But if you think of all the colors of petunias, and I had no idea what the original color of petunias were, red maybe. Those are all done in labs, and those are cultivars. And in order to get that, they change the genetics. And they simply don't provide as much nectar. It's a lot like the vegetables in the grocery store. In order to get, these bright green vegetables that look bright green, or the tomatoes that stay forever and never ripen, those have no nutritious value. They've taken all of that out in order to get this specific trait, so that looks good in people that buy it. Yes.
So how do you find out? You said you don't know, what the original color of petunias are. How do we find out what the species is?
Well, you I don't want Master Gardeners even cringe at this. You need to know the botanical name, and unfortunately I didn't, when we get to some of the plants, I'll try to tell you, but unfortunately I didn't include any cultivars, so you're not going to see how it's presented, but I think I can explain it. And remind me if I don't do it later, okay, because I forget. Yes. Yes.
Fancy name and focus.
It's a single quotation mark.
Yeah.
It's a single quotation mark. Thank you.
Yeah.
Spring blooms. These are just a few that you can bloom. Now, you will notice there are changes in your handouts. I listed some of the plant names rather than trying to give you the pictures, which you won't be able to see very well anyway. These all attract pollinators. The Solomon seal and wood poppies are in shade. You probably don't see the bees that go to them because they're tiny. There are a large number of bees that are out there that we just don't even see because they're so small. Holly trees. Most of us, at least around where I live, which is south of here, have native holly trees. Walk around one of those when they're in bloom in the spring. In fact, you can usually smell them before you get to them when they're in bloom. They have a sort of a sticky, sweet smell. They'll be covered frequently with very tiny bees that are busy pollinating them. And they need those in order to form berries. Now, holly trees are what we call dioecious. There's a male and a female. You have to have a male in order to pollinate the female. The female is the one that will have the berries. So anytime you see red berries, you will know that's a female holly tree. Some spring suggestions. These are from the Master Gardener demonstration gardens over at the Community Resources Building on Duke Street, just across from the post office. We invite you to visit them. Not right now, they wouldn't have anything in bloom. There are a few berries on the winterberry holly trees that are down if you go down the lower area from the street. We have the beard tongue. Beard tongue is also a host plant for the Baltimore checker spot butterfly, along with cologne, which I don't have a photo of. This is also visited by hummingbirds in the spring, and bumblebees like it. They have little cup-like blooms. The New Jersey tea has small blooms on it. It blooms probably a little later in early June, and is very attractive to pollinators. The Golden Alexander is probably one you do not know. I'm not sure if it's absolutely native to Calvert County. It is native to the state of Maryland. It's called, it blooms in the spring, small blooms that do attract pollinators. It's also the host plant for the black swallowtail butterfly. It's something that you might plant if you don't like the caterpillars eating your parsley or your dill or fennel. I plant parsley for the butterfly caterpillars. I'm disappointed when I don't see any. Redbud, the blooms attract pollinators. The leaves are apparently attracted to the leaf-covered bee as well. And then Virginia sweet spire. Again, it blooms early. It has great fall color. It grows in a wide variety of conditions, from swamps actually to dry areas. The small blooms attract pollinators in the spring. This is again from our Master Gardener demonstration gardens. This is in July. We have the Joe Pye weed. We invite you to tour with us on July 23, and it will be at the Community Resources Building. It is listed in your Garden Smarter flyer if you happen to have one. If not, I think they still have some back there. We hope to see lots and lots of butterflies and some bees. And if we can recognize what the bees are, we'll tell you what they are. Some we know, carpenter bees, bumblebees, things like that. Easy to identify. Summer blooms that are there, the lobelias. Every yard should have at least a cardinal flower in it. You will love it. It will grow in sun or shade. If it grows in sun, it will need a lot more moisture. They grow wild in Calvert County in pretty wet, almost swampy conditions sometimes. They will tolerate standing water. Why do you want it? Do you like hummingbirds? Bees also go to it, so they're good for pollinators, but hummingbirds really love these, as well as the great blue lobelia. They say hummingbirds are always attracted to red. I have both. Sometimes I have grown them side by side. They visit whichever one has nectar in it, and they seem to know. And the Joe Pye weed, of course, can get very tall. It can be spectacular. It grows to 8 feet tall. I have to stake it because it falls over because I don't have quite enough sun. It blooms about the time the eastern tiger swallowtails hatch. So usually it's covered with them, and that's sometime in late July, mid to late July, depending on the season. They may be a little earlier this year. This is Anne-Marie Garden. This is another garden you can visit. They designed this as a butterfly rain garden. There's a mixture of plants here, coneflowers, Joe Pye weed, butterfly milkweed, which is just barely beginning to bloom. I think that's it. Maybe it isn't blooming. Oh, there it is. With my angle, I don't have very good color on the screen. But there's an abundance of different plants, and that's something you want to strive for. You want a variety of plants. Summer, another, well, Master Gardener and Master Naturalist and I installed a small pollinator garden on the grounds of the American Chestnut Land Trust at the Double Lake Farm. And these are some of the things that they attracted last summer. This is Rudbeckia cutleaf. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the cutleaf coneflower. This is a scarlet wasp that's pollinating it. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about wasps later. Please don't cringe. This hardly ever stings, and would only sting you if you picked it up and pinched it. And then it's self-defense. And if it's a male, it won't sting you at all. It doesn't have the capability. Black-eyed Susans, of course, we all know and love. And this is a pearl crescent butterfly. I do not know what these wasps are, but this is Cinnamera landica. You may not be familiar with it. It's a plant that will grow about this tall. It's called wild cinnamon. It has pea-like blooms, and you can tell by the leaf shape and that it is a member of the pea family. Deer don't eat it. That's a plus. I had hoped to have time to go through and mark these with things that the deer don't eat. But at our plant sale on May 6th, May 7th, you should have a flyer. We hope to mark the plants that deer don't eat. There are reasons why they don't eat some plants. Cinnamera landica, if you go to the drugstore and you go back to the section and you're looking for a laxative, there's Centicote, and many of them will say, in parentheses, cinnamon in it. The deer seem to know that. I didn't know why they didn't eat it for years, and finally read in something. This is why we don't eat cinnamon around it. Phlox paniculata, they will eat, as well as the black-eyed Susans. This one has Oh, that's another one, I'm sorry. Deer will eat this, but it attracts small bees almost year round. And once it starts blooming in the summer, it will continue to bloom really until fall. It keeps putting out tiny little new blooms. Fall blooms, Chrysopsis mariana. We call it Maryland golden aster. It is not an aster. It grows wild in not very good soil along the roadsides. I've seen it frequently. It will grow in meadows. It's a good, tough, hardy plant. It blooms late in the fall, and so it's very desirable in the garden. This is mist flower. This prefers some moisture, but it will spread. I have it all over my yard. A little too much, and it becomes like a weed. So if you plant it where you don't care if it spreads. This is the one I'm going to show you. This is a little crab spider hiding out in this bloom of the obedient plant, just waiting to grab maybe a bee, who knows? Something unsuspecting for its meal. Goldenrod is one of our best pollinator attractors, as well as a host plant to about 115 species of butterfly and moth caterpillars. Do you know what I mean when I say a host plant? Is everybody pretty comfortable with that term? Fall blooms, look for asters. Asters are terrific. They'll be just covered with small bees in the fall. Again, the goldenrod, as I already said, was very good. The switchgrass, yes, it blooms. Pale pink blooms, usually. You can barely see them in this photo. Not only does it provide a tiny bit of nectar, but you want grasses because they provide shelter. Winter-round shelter. This is a grass you can leave the stalks all winter and cut it down about now. And it provides a lot of shelter for bees, insects, small birds, who knows what else is in there. The fall shade garden, you've already seen the bridal wreath goldenrod and the snake root. This is more snake root. And this is another aster that will grow in partial shade. It's probably going to be difficult for you to find. It's called a blue wood aster. I don't know where to tell you to buy it. Some of these plants you should be able to buy at our plant sale in early May. We have not ordered plants yet, and I don't know what people are bringing from their yards. But we do plan to offer a lot of native plants. We always offer a lot of native plants. Other things you can do is provide nesting and egg-laying sites. Many of our native bees burrow into the ground. I'll tell you more about that in a couple of minutes. Don't think that you have to mulch every square inch. Somehow we've gotten into this, and I think I blame it on the nurseries. If there's not a plant there, mulch it. Well, shredded hardwood mulch is not very good. It changes the pH of the soil. If you put it on too thickly, it will keep the rainfall from getting through. It will also keep oxygen out of the soil. It's actually detrimental to the plants. So we encourage you to use these. That's what I use. They're lighter weight, they break down, they add nitrogen to the soil. Some shredded hardwood will actually take nitrogen out of the soil as it decomposes. Avoid shredded hardwood. Woody vegetation, rotting wood. I live in a wooded area. I have tons of it. And that's why I have so many sweat bees and other bees that have to drill into wood to make their nests. And you want to leave nesting materials. I don't know how you provide mud. If it rains, you're going to have, if you leave a bare area, you'll have mud. You could do what you do with butterflies, is have a dish with sand and water in it. But instead of sand, you want to use soil, so they could use it in nesting. And I'll tell you who uses that in just a couple of minutes. So it's okay to be messy. This is also something the Audubon Society recommends if you want to attract birds and provide habitat for them in overwintering. I know something denned up in here a few years ago. I don't know what it was, never saw it, but it was sort of neat. How many of you are vegetable gardeners? So you want to attract bees. How many of you have always thought you needed to attract honeybees? They might do a little bit. They won't do much. Bumblebees are our most effective pollinator of all of these plants. I'm not going to read them to you. You can read them. Sweat bees, yes, they pollinate. Believe it or not, they aren't around just to get crushed in your arm, get the minerals and salts out of the sweat on your squash bees. We're going to talk about these individually. Bumblebees, they are the most efficient, the most effective pollinator that we have. Far more efficient than honeybees for most plants. They live in colonies that are established by a new queen in the spring. And this is the process they go through. The queen has mated in the fall. She burrows into the ground somewhere, hibernates over the winter, comes out fairly early in the spring, flies around. Of course, she has to eat, so she's looking for something, some nectar, a little pollen. She finds a little burrow in the ground, maybe a mouse hole or something, and she'll go in, she'll clean it out, and this is going to be her nesting site. As she collects pollen and nectar, she makes what they call honey pots, little balls with the pollen held together by the nectar, and she lays eggs in it. As the eggs hatch and form larvae and start to expand, and they'll also be eating the pollen, and no, they won't at that stage, excuse me. But they have little cocoons, but they will grow inside them. So she has to keep patching it up. Now the first bumblebees that hatch are female, but they're sterile worker bees. So they go out and collect the nectar and the pollen and bring it back. You won't see the large queen very late in the year. She's staying underground, making more honey pots, laying more eggs. Somewhere toward the end of summer, some of the eggs that lay will produce males, and some will produce fertile females. They mate. Everybody dies except the queen. She burrows back down to the ground. She starts the process all over again next year. We have about 21 species native here in the East. There's a poster, oh, it's mine on this table over here. It shows most of them. Bumblebees also, as I said, are among the first to appear in the spring and they're the last to disappear in the fall. There's a variety of, among those species, some of them have long tongues, some have short tongues. So different species are going to pollinate different plants. They also perform what we call sonication, or the buzz effect. They pollinate your tomatoes. In fact, that's one hanging on a tomato bloom. Tomato blooms have long tubes with the pollen in them. It's hard to get out. They can be wind pollinated. Again, if they are animal pollinated or pollinated by a bee, they will have more nutrition, more flavor, and they'll grow bigger. Why do honeybees not pollinate tomato blossoms? They probably can't because they don't do this buzz effect. I'll explain that in a moment. Tomatoes have no nectar. They have pollen with no nectar. Why do honeybees need nectar? What do they make honey from? Nectar. They chew it. The books say masticate, which sounds a little better than chew it. Each drop about, I've seen different numbers, 17 to 18 times, to get all of the real liquid out of it so that it's the honey consistency, and then it goes in the hive. So if you take a pint of honey, I want you to sit and look at it sometime and just think, how many bees have you chewed? How many times? Someone may have calculated it, I have no idea. In order to make that honey for you to eat. They didn't make it for you to eat, of course, they made it for their hive. But you or someone stole it from them. Back to the sonication or the buzz effect, the bumblebee will actually grasp it in their jaws. They don't make a buzzing sound with their mouths. They quiver their flight muscles. They don't quiver their wings because they might fly away, but they quiver the flight muscles, and that's the buzzing that you hear. And that provides a vibration. And it has to be just the right vibration for different plants. They also pollinate peppers, eggplants, honeybees don't go near those. Those plants do have some nectar, but it's very weak and not very appealing. So they're there for the pollen. One of the reasons that we have tomatoes year-round now is because they learned this about bumblebees. They bring bumblebees into the greenhouses. They will provide some sugar water for nectar for them. And the bumblebees pollinate the tomatoes in the greenhouses. Some of them, I think, leave windows open so the bumblebees can go back, but they will come back, and it must have some kind of nesting sites in there. The bumblebees wouldn't come back to them. For some reason, many years ago, they decided that in order to, I don't know what they did, but they shipped the bumblebees to, our native bumblebees, to the Netherlands for training and doing this, I guess. Who knows? Sounds crazy to me. In doing that, because they put so many in a confined area, one of them would get sick from a virus or something, and then they spread it. So then they shipped them back, and now we do have some viruses around the bumblebees that are out in the wild. I don't know why they do it. I think now there are places in the United States that provide them, but it's a big business providing bumblebees for the nurseries. Another plant I wanted to point out is the buttonbush, which is a small tree, and it blooms in July. And the nectar is way down in there. Swallowtail butterflies like it too. And it's one shrub or small tree that blooms in July. Not a lot of things are blooming. Not a lot of shrubs and trees are blooming. There are a lot of other plants blooming. These are some of their favorite nectar plants. I've covered some of them, but I do want to talk about the milkweed. Milkweed will host about, in addition to the monarch caterpillar, it hosts about 12 other species of caterpillars. It also hosts about 30-some different insects. It has desirable nectar, which the monarch doesn't pollinate. I learned last night, the monarch does not pollinate, but apparently the fritillarias do, and it has something to do with getting their legs, and I don't have anything to show you or even understand it well enough to explain it. There are little sacs in there. They get their feet caught in them, and then they carry it to another bloom. But milkweed, particularly the orange butterfly milkweed, we really recommend in your yards to attract bees, wasps, butterflies, you name it. And we do plan to offer that this year too. Squash bees. Has anyone ever seen a squash bee? Aren't you? Have you ever looked for any? Gonna have to get up early, get up at dawn when squash bloom opens. Squash have to be pollinated. One bloom is male, another one is female. The pollen has to go from the male over to the female. And it's done by squash bees. Sometimes they even sleep in them at night. And they pollinate only early in the morning. They nest in the ground, so if you grow squash and you mow your garden, you may want to be careful, because if there are little holes under there, you don't want to disturb the bees. They also pollinate pumpkins, melons, and some of the other squashes. Sweat bees, yes, they do pollinate. In fact, they're very effective pollinators of many plants, because they also can do this buzz effect on blueberries as well as tomatoes. Probably not as much on tomatoes. They're small. These are two that we see around here. The bright green, metallic green one is very pretty, and the striped one is usually the one that gets on your arm. These were taken on a plant called mountain mint. It is native, it's a native mint. It has all the attributes of mints. It spreads like mad. I highly recommend it because of what it will attract to your yard, but if you're into a neat yard, you may not want to deal with it. Again, we need rotting wood for the sweat bees to burrow in. And I'm not sure how many species there are that are native to Maryland. Fruiting plants, fruit trees, shrubs, blackberries, blueberries, need specific, well, they don't need specific bees. Honeybees will pollinate most of them, but they're not as effective pollinators of them. And this is where we're going to talk about wasps just a little bit. Yes?
They can hear that question.
I'm sorry.
They can hear that.
Yeah, I see. Yes. How do I know what?
Well, most of us can't tell by looking. However, with most bees, the male will have a little yellow dot, and I know that's very true of the carpenter bee on his forehead. In fact, Dr. Ralph at the University of Maryland, who's a terrific talker, is an entomologist, and he has a little video showing him going by and taking this bee off of a plant where it was getting nectar. And everybody's going, well, he said, you can do this. You know, you'll really amaze your friends and your family and your cousins. And, he said, and then he goes back and he says, oh, make sure there's the yellow spot on the head. If not, you'll really amaze your entertain your cousins and your family. I haven't tried it, but I have seen it, particularly on carpenter bees, which are large bees and easier to see. But most of the time, you're not going to be able to tell. Just know that about half the bees out there won't sting you because they're male. Yes?
Is it screaming?
Yes. Oh, I should be back here.
Screaming?
Sorry.
Yeah, you might want to repeat that question that she asked.
Thank you, Artie. The question has to do, how can you tell which are male and which are female? Most of the time we can't tell. But on many of the bees, the males will have a yellow spot on their forehead. Particularly, I've seen it on carpenter bees, which are large and it's easy to see. Dr. Ralph, who's an entomologist at the University of Maryland, speaks to master gardeners a lot, particularly at training day, and he has a short video that shows him taking a bee, getting nectar off of a plant, you know, and holding it in his hand. And then he said, you can do this and really entertain your family or your friends. And then he goes back and says, oh, see the yellow spot on the head? You need that to make sure that it's a male and will not sting you, or you might really entertain your family with it. But back to wasps. Wasps are very desirable. They do a little bit of pollination, primarily on shallow blossomed plants because they have short tongues. Wasps are also the ancestors of bees. The theory is that the wasps, for some reason, were at a bloom catching prey, and they decided they really liked the nectar, that tasted good. And so eventually they evolved into bees. And in doing that, the plant said, well, if you're going to drink my nectar, you're going to have to do some work for me. You're going to have to carry my pollen to another blossom so that I can reproduce. So bees have hairy bodies, wasps do not. They're very different in shape, the abdomen and the thorax. Bees, what was I going to say? Bees are the vegetarian wasps. Yes.
What dog?
Yep.
Those work?
Mm-hmm.
I've got a tremendous amount.
Mm-hmm.
I know what they eat.
Spiders.
What, do they pollinate? Do they transfer?
Mm-hmm.
They're mostly spiders.
The spiders are there not for the adult wasp,
Right.
they're there for the young to eat.
they
So
operate
the
pollen.
wasp has to eat something and it eats pollen. It eats nectar, excuse me. But you want wasps because they prey on what we call the bad bugs. If you have wasps, if you have a garden with a lot of variety of plants in it, you will have a healthy garden because you will attract both the wasps and many other insects that prey on other insects. And you pretty much take care of the pests. Yes.
I grow hops and my son's big here, and every year I have what everybody calls ground. I'm not sure if that means my husband says that they're really wasps. They have all these holes and at dusk they will go down underneath. Do you know anything about that?
Well, ground bee is a very common term that's used to describe almost any bee that burrows into the ground or a wasp. It could be any number of things. There are several species that live in the ground. As I said, the bumblebee does. Many wasp species do.
It looks like it's one species, and it's all in this one particular area.
It could be that they like something in the blooms and the nectar in the hop plant. It could be something that very specifically pollinates those plants. But I don't know. You could catch one and send it to Sam Drogi. Let him identify it.
Yeah.
Question.
Yes.
I have a lot of wasps who make their nest right near my porch door,
Mm-hmm.
so then they come in the house. So how do I get the nests away from the gutters and close to the house so they'll be somewhere else? Not.
Is it the paper wasp?
Yes.
You could just discourage them, I guess, by keep knocking it down. That's the only thing I would know to do. Rather than, I never advise spraying. And they won't hurt you. They really aren't interested in you. If you have a wasp that stings, it's most likely a yellow jacket, which is a wasp, not a bee. But yellow jackets actually are social insects, and they burrow in the ground too. They'll have lots and lots of trails, but they do defend the hive. Hornets and yellow jackets are another issue. Most of the wasps I'm talking about are solitary. They may not appear solitary to you because they're building these mud dauber nests or these wasps, paper wasps. But they are, because they don't really hang out there. That's really for the purpose of incubating the young and providing food for them. Mason bees. I'm not sure I've ever seen one of these. I would love to, because there's the blue bee. They're also called the orchard bee, and there's a reason. 250 mason bees can pollinate an acre of apples. And just look how many honeybees it would take. 15,000 to 20,000. Amazing. There are reasons for that. They get up earlier, or I should say she gets up earlier. The female does most of the pollinating. She flies faster, and she carries the pollen in a very different way. Honeybees and bumblebees carry their pollen packed with nectar on little scooped out places on their hind legs. The mason bee, you can see the hairs underneath. We're doing that one. That's where she carries the pollen, there and maybe on her back. So it's very loose and it isn't packed in with nectar. So she distributes it very quickly on the next blossoms. They nest in old beetle tunnels. There are lots and lots of bee houses, bee hotels, bee motels. John's building a bee barn. You want tubes of different shapes and sizes because you want to accommodate the mason bee. It's called the mason bee because of this. It will block up the end with a mixture of mud and water. Well, mud, mixture of dirt and water. It will lay an egg, put in some pollen and nectar, blocks up the next section, lays another egg, and repeats it all the way up to the end of the chamber. And that's why they like these. And that's how they've gotten their common name. But as I just said, they pollinate apples. Most of your fruit trees are easily pollinated by mason bees, done more effectively and more efficiently than honeybees. The carpenter bee. Yes, they do more than just drill holes in your wood. I've had these fly and bounce off my forehead and hit me. They aren't likely to sting you, and if they do, it's a very big sting in spite of the size of the bee. As you all know, most of you know, the females chew holes in your unpainted wood. Some people do have problems with their houses. They aren't aggressive. They pollinate blueberries, blackberries, and do Do all of you know what I mean when I say canola? You know canola oil, but do you know what the plant really is? There's no canola plant. Mustard. No. Mustard seed.
Well, rapeseed, I'm sorry, you're saying rapeseed. not-
Great, all right.
Yes, rapeseed. But rapeseed wasn't the name they could really put on the bottle of oil, could they?
And that canola oil is a marketing term because a lot of it grows in.
Canadian oil,
Canadian oil.
low acid. The other thing is, without refining it in some way, you couldn't use it. It would be distasteful, and I think it might even be harmful. So that's a coined term in Canada because they have acres and acres and acres of mustard. So I'm going to talk about honeybees very briefly. We do have the Garden Smarter talk on September 10th, and it will be given by, I think, 2 ladies who raise bees and keep bees. They have a very different attitude than I do. My attitude is honeybees should be used for nectar, primarily. But yes, they do some pollination as well. They are not native to the United States. They were brought over by the early settlers. Why did they bring them over? Not for pollination. They didn't understand it then. They brought them over for the honey. You have to remember, they didn't have sugar available. They didn't have grocery stores. Sugar was extremely expensive if they could get it. So they depended on honey for sweetening, and also the beeswax candles and things were made from them. So they were brought over very early. As you all know, honeybees live in large colonies, with hives usually, and they can, one of the reasons that they're used so much, they can be transported around the country in these big air-conditioned trucks. And they're kept alive on sugar water until they get there. It's a horrible thing to do to bees, frankly. Because then when they get to a crop, they're pollinating only one crop at a time. And they are accustomed to, they are generalists when they search for nectar. So they're accustomed to going to many different plants instead of just one crop. So, and I think all of these conditions have contributed to the colony collapse disorder. There are many things, of course, that have contributed to that, not just being moved around the country, but it probably affects their health. We think that, we don't know if they have caused the extinction of any of our native bees because, of course, records weren't kept. We do know in Australia there is a flowering plant, a perennial, that scientists are concerned will go extinct because the honeybees can get the nectar from the bloom without taking the pollen. So they do not pollinate the plant. There is a native bee, native to Australia, that does pollinate that specific plant. And the honeybees are far more aggressive, so they're driving it away. So scientists are afraid that eventually they're going to lose both the plant and the pollinator, because the pollinator is very restricted in what it will pollinate. A couple of, I think, really neat wasps. I think they're cute. There's a little potter wasp. It constructs pots out of mud. It will put a beetle larvae or a caterpillar in each little pot. You can see where it's sealed it. And the egg will hatch. The larvae will eat the caterpillar or the beetle larvae, and then it will work its way out of the pot. I took those were online in the group. I'm not sure I still have them because they're pretty fragile. But the little hole, they actually bored out the side. They didn't try to dislodge the little plug at the top here. The skulled wasps are very beneficial. They are not likely, in fact, none of these are likely to sting you. You would have to go pick them and probably pinch them. They would only do it in selected things. These are 2 that we have in the east. The parasitized beetle grubs. Anybody have a problem with Japanese beetles? We'd like to have these around. Yes.
Do they actually dig into the ground looking for them?
The grubs? Yes. Yeah. And I don't know if they nest in the ground or not. I really don't know their nesting habits. It's possible. But they're very pretty. In fact, some of the wasps are downright gorgeous. So I'm not going to go through this again. This is just a reiteration of all of the things that I've covered, the things you can do. You also have this handout, which pretty much summarizes everything I've covered. Don't ignore the plants that they've recommended. Well, they do say goldenrod, but this really was done for the Pacific Northwest. So make sure you get a copy of this because it's colorful, it's easy to read, and it covers everything that I've done. One of the things that we recommend is avoiding pesticides. The neonicotinoids, they have pretty much determined, are not the only cause of the disappearance of bees, the honeybees, but they're definitely the main factor. There are other reasons that the bees die in their nests from mites and viruses and other diseases. But the reason the bees were disappearing and they were not finding hives full of dead bees is because the neonicotinoid, and yes, it is based on nicotine, affected, it was systemic, it affected their ability to navigate and to find their way back to the hives. And they've pretty much shown this in lab tests, that they simply can't navigate. That's why they weren't finding dead bees around the hive. There are a lot of them out for home use. I suggest that you avoid them. I know Bayer makes some, and some other, I've forgotten the other company that makes them. They're widely used, unfortunately, in spraying fields. They found they're very effective against a lot of insects. But the problem with pesticides, with insecticides in particular, they are indiscriminate. What percentage of insects do you think are truly harmful? Any guesses?
50%.
50? One. Actually, I think it's a point something, but let's just say it's one. So when you kill, you're killing 99% that might be effective at taking care of the pests, or might be a butterfly or a bee that you would like to have. The neonicotinoids they found last at least 3 years, and I don't know how far along the research is, whether they're finding that it lasts longer. What happens is it's in the soil, and the plant will bring it up through its vascular system into the nectar. And apparently it doesn't take very much to affect their ability to fly. If it's a lot, because they sprayed with some neonicotinoid in Oregon in a Target parking lot and killed thousands of bumblebees. That is where the spray landed immediately on the bees. So it was a very high dosage. That practice, of course, has been abandoned. And they encourage people to use it only on food crops now. And who knows? But they are finding that it enters the waterways. We think that it may eventually have an effect on fish and on frogs. And yes?
How do you know which pesticides are those types?
They might use the term neonicotinoid, but there are also other brands. My advice is, don't use any of them. If you have a healthy garden with a wide variety of plants, you won't need them. And as for killing wasps, it took a while to convince my husband of this. They're not going to bother you. Just walk past them. Don't put your hand on one, for goodness sakes. Yeah, they'll sting you. Now, hornets and yellow jackets, that's another matter, but the average wasp that you see is not going to hurt you. Reference books, they pulled a lot up here. I have some you're welcome to look at over here. Online publications, and these are things you can read on your handout. The Pollinator Partnership has a project called the Million Pollinator Garden Challenge. You can go on, if you have a lot of pollinated plants and you have bees in your yard, go on and register in your garden. I haven't done it yet. I think I got on when we first did it, and I couldn't get to the website for some reason. But it is available. I'm probably going to register Master Gardener Demo Gardens on it too. They're trying to get to 1 million. I think they're still less than 200,000. So try to get on that if you can. There's a lot of information also on Pollinator Partnership that you can go to. Information everywhere. These are some native plant pollinator gardens you can visit. In fact, we have 2 tours of the Master Gardener Demonstration Gardens. Do you all know where the Community Services Building is? It's across the street from the post office. So we're holding 1 tour on May 21st, which isn't far off. We have to get the gardens cleaned up. And we'll also do a Baywise certification at that time. And then the other one is July 23. That's the one where you'll be able to have Joe Pipey and doing a lot of butterflies. The North Beach Sunrise Garden. Do you know where it is? I'm sure if you live north, you know where it is. Master Gardeners assisted in selecting plants for that, and we're still very active. And we're taking tours on June 4 and September 17th there. Anne-Marie Gardens in Dowell, they do not have any signs marking their plants. You can visit the Master Gardener Gardens anytime. We do have ID signs out, not for everything, but for most things, and we hope to expand that. Calvert Marine Museum does have their plants marked with ID signs for the most part. If you're in the outer part, you don't have to pay. If you want to go to the rain garden or at the back, you will have to pay to get through the museum. The American Chestnut Land Trust, there's a small pollinator garden there at Double Oak Farm. It will have identification signs, maybe by May, I hope, or later. And then I was talking to John Bacon here about the Fishing Creek Trail in Chesapeake Beach. Master Gardeners help them identify a lot of the plants, and they do have wonderful ID signs. They also have a booklet that's available. Where can they get the booklet, John? Okay. And they can go online too.
Other places, they don't have a pollinator garden in Ocala.
Oh, thank you for reminding me of that. Actually, I think I advised the Eagle Scout who put that pollinator garden in several years ago. I'd forgotten about it. So many things in there. So this is the end of my talk. Like us on Facebook. This entire presentation with all the photos will be on it maybe by next week sometime. There's also a lot of other information there. Also, the library is streaming this. I don't know if you can get to it later or not. Robin isn't here, so I can't really give you anything. But you have you do not have to be a member of Facebook to get onto the Facebook page and get to the information that's there. So thank you. Are there any more questions? Yes, I'm going to take it first, Susan.
To plant native plants, flowers, to establish the area, when is the best time to mow down everything and start it? Because I went to the talk last night, we really didn't talk about that.
No, we didn't. And, you know, we're limited. I would like to have gone into it, but we're unlimited on time too. I've already been here for over an hour. We recommend really don't till.
Right.
Use what we refer to as the lasagna method. I would go do it now if you want to do any work in the spring on a new bed.
Get rid of the weeds and
Lay down newspapers, wet them down heavily, lay down a thick layer. Some people use cardboard, but it's very hard to dig through the cardboard layer. I put down a layer, I have lots of leaves because I live in the woods. If you can get leaves, that's the best thing to do. Put down a thick layer of leaves and put something like leaf grow compost over the top, maybe even a little topsoil if you wanted to. A good quality topsoil, but I would go with the leaf grow because it's compost, it has more organic matter in it. And you could probably plant through it in early May, mid-May.
so the newspapers will cut the weeds back.
The newspapers shade out the weeds and keep the sun from going to the roots. Now, if you have, what do we call it, wiregrass, they'll just grow underneath it. So you almost have to dig those out. Aren't you?
HGRC website has, YouTube for the zombie gardening. Just tells you everything you need to know about it.
Okay.
And that website is on your second slide there, I think, extension .UND, something, on the second
Oh,
slide,
yeah.
on the first page. Yes, do go to that website, it's very good. And I think she's next.
You didn't mention anything about herbs.
Well, I guess I did when I talked about the wasps, but yes, plant herbs, thyme, rosemary, or oregano, basil will bloom in the summer. They're small blooms, but they seem to have a lot of nectar. It's just like I showed you the mountain mint. Those blooms are extremely tiny.
Is it beneficial to plant a few of these pollinating plants in your vegetable garden or around the
Yes.
periphery?
Yes, I would plant them right in the vegetable garden or definitely around the edges, but you could make room for them. In fact, organic gardeners have found that they're very, very effective. I've forgotten the list of plants, but I know goldenrod is one. Let me just point out on the mint. See that the little white two things? Those are the blooms. They're tiny, but apparently they have nectar that a lot of insects like. And butterflies. Now, sir.
Maybe two questions actually.
That's
Wiregrass, how do you get rid of it? I've got a bunch going to the area that I have.
RT, you got any
I keep pulling it out,
suggestions?
Pulling it out.
You keep pulling it, wiregrass, have
Yeah.
to get wiregrass out, you just gotta keep pulling it. It, has stolons and rhizomes and everything else, and they will grow through the root ball of the plants you want to keep. That's the biggest problem, nothing slows it down. Like Judy said, if you try to mulch on top to suppress it, it loves that stuff, it will run right into the feeds on it.
Declare war.
Yeah, I have it. I'm losing.
Yeah, you can try to dig down and get the root out, but the roots will go so deep that it's very, very hard to do.
It's just a constant battle every year.
Yeah.
Still try to, like any integrated pest management, you have to know how much you're willing to accept of it. And I've kept it out of my garden at home just by, first of all, putting on organic matter that keeps the soil tilled up where I can pull those weeds out. And just pull them out. Start now.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Also, the colony disease is affecting honeybees. Is that also affecting these other bees that we have?
Not so much because they don't live in colonies, but yes, they're going to be susceptible to the neonicotinoids that come up into the nectar. It does affect them. They've shown that it does in bumblebees, and as I said, when it's sprayed directly on them, as it was in Oregon, I think they were spraying linden trees, it killed thousands of bumblebees. So yes, it affects everything. When it's crops that are being sprayed, the particular plants don't come back up, but it's still in the soil, and they know it lasts for at least 3 years. And I think a lot of nurseries treated with it because they would keep all the nurseries have lots and lots of pests because it's just like the school, one kid gets a cold, the next one gets so on. So you've got all these plants in a small area, so a lot of things spread. But I think both Lowe's and Home Depot now require that it be marked if neonicotinoids have been applied. There's a lot of conflict in the industry. They really like it. Most of them like it and use sprays. Yes.
What kind of unintended consequences when you use vinegar?
I'm not sure that there's much, but it's not very effective. I just read something. If you search horticultural vinegar online, I found an Oregon website the other day, and they just said, yes.
I'm also in the woods and have buildings like this every year. Do you chop the leaves before you use them as mulch, or do you use them as whole leaves?
Both.
Really? So the whole leaves will run enough water for them?
Yes.
And then how do you control the bulbs that use the leaves at the top of their trunk?
I don't, I have cats. But yes, it is a problem. I would use the whole leaves more around my shrubs and places like that. They will cover very small plants, but I have a lot of ferns in the wooded area. They'll grow right up through them. So will Solomon seal. My yard's pretty much covered this year. I have some that are chopped. I do have a big, have you seen the big choppers with the string at the bottom? Yes, I would recommend it because they do break down more quickly and they don't blow around. It takes a bushel of leaves to make a cup of compost. The reason is that most of the leaf is cellulose, so all your composting really is the stem and the veins, and that's all that really goes back into the soil. But there is some nitrogen with it. Yeah. Was there somebody else? I'm sorry, over here? Oh, okay, Lucy, you were first.
Yeah, I just real quick, your local problem, you might want to
They do recommend apple slices in a mouse trap. I know someone said they had great luck with it one year. They won't eat cheese like a mouse will, but they are vegetarians. That's the other thing is moles are meat eaters and voles are vegetarians. Moles actually eat a lot of the grubs in the soil. They just put the tunnels in your yard. So.
my other comment was about how you put, it's just, that's really great.
Yes, but pyrethrum, if it kills, it kills. It's still damaging. And only 1% of it kills.
Right, but what I'm saying is, this is what the county is,
And a lot of people think it's safe because it's plant-based.
it's bad for birds, it's bad for bees, it's for children, it's for lots of
And it's 1% effective if not, yeah. Yes.
Woman from mold, I had problems in my garden area. I got the ultrasound, the sticks put in the ground and it gives out an ultrasound.
Does that work for voles as well as?
Yeah, it did.
Okay. But then they have to go somewhere, so.
Well, yeah, this is true. But then it's somebody else's problem or another.
Or another part of the yard you don't care about.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing with this, we're encouraging more people to try to plant along the roadways unless they mow. If they mow, don't bother. But waste areas in your yard that you don't need for grass, look around your yard and see how much grass you really need. And we do this as a bay-wise too, because grass doesn't control any runoff at all. In fact, it's sometimes no better than a paved surface in runoff. So we really encourage people to reduce the lawn as much as possible. Something like 33,000 acres. There are more acres of lawn in the United States than there are acres of cultivated corn. So, yes.
I noticed that on one of the slides, we have the weeds and white flies and plants. Is there any bush or anything that can grow much smaller that they would migrate to?
Yes, absolutely. I can only use so many. Many of our trees too are wonderful host plants. Oak trees will support a huge number of species of butterfly and moth caterpillars, as well as a whole range of other insects. Tulip trees. Have you ever bought tulip tree honey in the spring or in the summer? The blooms on tulip trees, and they're very common in Calvert County. You don't want it close to your house because they have a weak root system for their height. But the tulip tree blossom has more nectar than any other blossom in the northern hemisphere. So when it's in bloom, the bees will spend a lot of time gathering nectar from there. Another plant is, I don't really want it in my yard, but the wild locusts that grow along the road. I talked to, I think one of the beekeepers used to talk in September, said the weight of her, she weighs her hives for a NASA experiment, or did, that the weight really goes up in the spring when those trees are in bloom. So they have a lot of nectar too. If you've ever parked your car under a tulip tree when it's in bloom, it's hard to get that sticky nectar. It's very, very, almost viscous on its own. I do recommend some books that are here at the library to be checked out. This is put out by the Xerxes Society. That website is on the handout. I forgot, I think a membership's about $35 a year. They work for invertebrates. They've done a lot for bees. This is their major push right now. But at the back, you'll see a lot of plants listed. But almost any of our flowering shrubs, the buttonbush, of course, doesn't bloom until July. But shadbush, the viburnums, hawthorns, dogwoods, many of those are also host plant for some of the butterflies. What else? If you want.
I was wondering, I can be specific. Is there sort of a bush I can use as like a green fence instead? And then that problem also.
You want an evergreen. The best native tree would be our native holly trees. Because they're evergreen. And those blooms in the spring, both male and female bloom. Well, you have to have a male in order for the females to have parents for cross-pollination. They aren't showy, but they do have a fragrance, and they attract a lot of bees. The other one, and it's non-native, so don't recommend that you do a whole fit. In fact, we really don't encourage monocultures. A few holly trees maybe scattered along with maybe some deciduous trees, so you didn't have a solid fence. But another one that's non-native and that I don't think would ever become invasive are camellias. They're evergreen. The one thing I do recommend about using camellias, their blooms are very late, and I've seen a monarch butterfly nectaring this late as about November 13 or 14 on one. So they would be late providers of nectar late in the year. But I would recommend a mixture of deciduous, non-deciduous. There are some deciduous trees that have nice form. But if you want to screen the property, you're not going to do that unless you couple it with something else. Okay, would you
Presentation here at 12, so we.
yeah, and we have a drawing, just some small.
You could also turn on the lights if somebody.
Judy, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, John. I don't know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming.